Necrosis is our next important topic, which is also called the irreversible injury. Irreversible injury can lead to either necrosis or apoptosis. Any of these two can happen in the case of the irreversible injury. Necrosis fundamentally is a cytoplasmic driven process, is what you need to remember. There is a cell swelling and denaturation of the cellular proteins in case of the necrosis. Whenever hypoxia, ischemia lead to hypoxia, lead to necrosis, which is the ultimate death. So, hypoxia lead to decreased amount of ATP. If the ATP is not there, ion channels cannot work. If the ion channels does not work, there is nobody to flow the water out of the cell, and the cells become swollen and they will ultimately die. Now, if you look at the temporal sequence of events in the case of necrosis, typically within hours after the insult, there are no clear-cut features. One day after, there will be microscopic feature of waviness. 1 to 3 days after, there is a gross necrosis with neutrophilic infiltration. 3 to 7 days later, there is a disintegration of the dead tissue and accumulation of macrophages. 1 to 2 weeks later, there is a granulation tissue. 2 to 8 weeks later, there is a collagen deposition, and within about 2 months, there is a dense fibrous scar, is what you have to basically remember. Now, whenever there is a cell injury, what are the changes that occur in the nucleus? Pycnosis means condensation of the chromatin. Karyorrhexis, which is the nuclear fragmentation, and karyolysis, dissolution of the nucleus. They're all the various sequence of events in the cell injury. Note the different types of necrosis. Mainly, you must know which scenario, which type of necrosis. Liquefactive necrosis, in the case of the brain infarction from stroke. Any high vascular organ, if you take lung has dual circulation. So whenever necrosis occurs there, it becomes hemorrhagic necrosis. TB, you have caseous necrosis. Then in the breast and pancreatitis, when there is a trauma to the breast, then you have a fat necrosis, and there can be few microcalcifications which also can occur into the necrotic tissue in the case of the carcinoma. So this is an example of how a coagulative necrosis. What is the main feature of coagulative necrosis? The cell outline is not altered, unlike in other forms. So this is a typical left ventricular wall which has undergone the coagulative necrosis. In heart, it is a very classical type of necrosis. There is a tuberculous focus where there is a large area of the caseous necrosis, is what need to be remembered. To summarize, already we discussed this. Apoptosis versus necrosis. Any exam you go, this is one of the favorite questions of the examiner. It is a cell shrinkage which you see in apoptosis. Swelling of the cell in necrosis. Chromatin condensation, fragmentation with apoptotic bodies in apoptosis, but nuclear lysis, karyolysis in necrosis only. Many cells at a time, if it is necrosis, single cells any time is the apoptosis. Lysosomes are intact without any inflammation, without any calcification in case of apoptosis. And we have seen that mitochondrial proteins are involved in mediating the apoptosis. We have discussed it as a special topic. That is not the situation in necrosis. And apoptosis is an energy dependent process which is not so with necrosis. Whereas apoptosis energy dependent is what you have to ultimately remember. So that's all the story about what we call it as necrosis topic.